All right. So I guess we're live again. So trying something new today. Instead of going over everything completely, I just thought I'd do a quick little intro like that to give an idea of the topic that we're going to be talking about. All right. So today we're talking about the reaction to kicker Harrison Butker stating Catholic declarations is a big deal. There's a lot to unpack with that. If you haven't seen the 20-minute video, please go and take a look because it's a very good video. It's an excellent speech. I don't agree with everything in it, but I agree with a vast majority of it. And he is very well spoken for someone who doesn't typically make speeches. So let me just show. Let's see. Present. All right, let's go. Oh, actually, let's do window. All right, sorry. All right, here we go. All right, so if this isn't big enough, just let me know in the comments. So basically, I'm looking at Kristen Hawkins' Twitter. She was the first one I saw post his full video. Again, if you haven't seen it, I recommend you do go and see it. It's a pretty good summarization of a lot of things that we have critiques about. Like he talks about babies in the womb and how that's promoted in the culture. How COVID, man, I loved it when he started talking about the failure of leadership in the church when it came to the sacraments. My gosh, it felt so satisfying to hear, and the way he explained it was very well done. So I can't say enough about how great that speech was, because that is what a lot of people are. That's what we want our leaders to do, right? Like we want courageous speeches like that. And he's kind of like, it's kind of funny because a topic that he says is staying in one's lane. And he is, in my opinion, very much staying in his lane. But what is it? How he spoke about the leaders of the church, they really should be the ones making these speeches, right? Like when it comes to how the culture is literally drilling down our throat, all these things, a football player stating it versus a bishop, a successor of the apostles, like you would expect the successor of the apostles to say it, not a football player. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't say it. He's definitely speaking to the truth of things, and he's using, like he said, his influence to the best of his ability. It's not something he asked for, but God put him in this position, and I think that's a very humble way of looking at it. I know some people will say, "Well, he's just," I don't know. Like there's a bunch of people who are very critical of him, and it reflects, in my opinion, more of the person who's being critical of him than what he said. And there's a few things I want to actually go over in that capacity. Let's see. So we have, if you haven't seen this yet, it's The View. And one of the women decides to talk about how his speech is similar to that of cults. And especially since he's part of the TLM. And in the video, he talks about being part of the TLM, that is very cult-like, and basically strawmans him into this position. Like it pigeonholes him in a way that is not fair to what he actually said. I'm not going to play any, I'm not going to play the what is it? The sound, because I don't want to get caught with any copyright stuff. It's just kind of playing in the background, I guess. But this is very important for a variety of reasons, because again, a football player who is Catholic was at a Catholic college talking about Catholic topics. And there's just this wildfire of a reaction from the culture, from people who honestly shouldn't care. I mean, if you heard someone from the Anglican ecclesial community, like, right, like Vatican II, the Anglican ecclesial community, you just say, all right, that's wrong. That's not what the Catholic Church believes. And we're going to have, go on with the rest of our day. But like, it's almost like there's like a full stop on culture just to talk about this point. I mean, like, I'm talking about it. And the reason why I'm talking about it is there's a variety of reasons. One of them is the fact that I have kids and I want my kids to be able to understand, all right, Dad, why are you talking about this current event? Well, this because this current event is actually very important. It's not like other current events. It's not like other problems that are in the church, because it's so impactful on the culture. It led to a group of non-Catholics and people who claim to be Catholic. Like, I don't know the status of U.S. Catholic Magazine, but my gosh, is that like the worst way you can interpret what he said? Celebrating a patriarchal structure that succeeds in keeping men in their place. In nowhere did he say anything close to that. Like, if you listen to the full 20 minutes, that's not it. The problem seems to be with this one, and let's see, in this one in particular, is the fact that he he emphasized the role of homemaker, of stay-at-home moms, and then it was beautiful where he explained, or he actually got choked up because he wasn't talking about anything he was doing, but he was talking about the fact that his wife was so supportive and what she did meant so much to him that he literally could not move on with the speech because he was on the verge of crying. And it was a beautiful, like, again, this speech is like great. Like, for someone who I mean, like, if he planned that, it's not so great, obviously, right? Because he's faking tears, but like, I don't think he did. He very much like made a wonderful speech with a real, what looked to be raw emotion. And The View kind of just took a snippet, interpreted it in the worst possible way, and then says, well, it's cult-like. They want to put women in their place. We're going backwards. A number of different, like, let's just say Q words, like political Q words, where if you're a feminist, like, you would immediately pick these up. If you are familiar with feminism and the terminology that they use to cue off each other, and when I say cue, I mean like they're saying a word and it kind of triggers them to have a particular response. And so there's a lot of that going around. It's going here, it's going in places that claim to be Catholic, and there's not this real push to understand or give the benefit of the doubt to someone who's a Catholic. Like, most of what he said, even though I didn't agree with some of it, specifically towards the end, there's a few things I didn't quite agree with, but it was like small things. It wasn't big things. It was small things. And, but like they're not trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, or at least that's not what it looks like. It looks like what they're trying to do is paint him in the worst possible picture. They're doing a bunch of ad hominem attacks, and then they're suggesting that he's making an argument. Like, it's like, imagine you're hearing from your friend the worst possible interpretation of what another friend said about you because that friend didn't like that other person. Like, it's a very similar dynamic, except we're all adults, and this isn't high school or middle school anymore. This isn't what I'm dealing with my kids at home. Like, this is very much grown adults making these same arguments. They never seem to have grown up to ask clarifying questions or to get to the heart of the matter. Instead, they have hit pieces to make this man look less than what he should be treated as. Like, he has dignity. He gave his thoughts about something. His bishop responded, saying that he supports his ability to say it, including the part where he criticized the leadership in the church. And that was the first time I'd actually seen the listening church listen and support. Yeah, it is quiet night. Sorry, I'm going to bring this up. It is a quiet night. The chat's not. I know it's been a while. It's been a while since I've been up. So if you come on YouTube, you can we can have a chat. You can chat with my wife. You can chat with other people. It does typically get pretty dynamic. There's sometimes where I can't even like talk in the chat because chat's on a completely different page. But all right, so coming back to this, so we have U.S. Catholic Magazine. I'll just go to the next one, and then we have the Catholic Church is stronger and more vibrant thanks to women diverse contributions in the home and religious life and in the workplace. So I've seen evidence, a lot of evidence. If you don't know, I'm a statistician. That points to the fact that the workplace being filled by women has stagnated salaries. And so for people who are complaining about, oh, well, we need two people to work to get jobs and to support the household, well, that kind of plays into it, right? Like this idea of it makes us stronger. I don't know if that's a word that is appropriate to say, because there's a lot of conflicting evidence that says that's not necessarily true. And that's not saying women shouldn't be in the workplace at all. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is because, there are certain professions that it makes a lot of sense. And there are times in women's lives where it makes a lot of sense for them to work. Like there's, and I'm not going to go into like the litany of all those variations or the nuances of that, but it's very much like we seriously have something wrong if our society is not supporting itself with a model that produces a thriving family. If the family is suffering because both parents are working and the children aren't being raised by their family, but by strangers at school, or by latchkey or by someone else, like that's a real problem. He has a wife that's, I mean, he's a millionaire, right? Like, so he has the ability to have, his wife has the ability to stay at home and be the prime teacher to his kids. And a lot of people don't have that capacity, have that ability. I am very glad to say that I have something similar. We don't have, my wife doesn't teach the kids, like they go to private school, but she stays at home and takes care of, our 3-year-old and our newborn. And we have 5 kids. And so, I don't make millions of dollars. And in a lot of cases, we were making like very close to ends meet, and we came really close to, losing a lot of things. But at the end of the day, just like with the emphasis in Harrison's speech, you got to trust in God. You got to follow the plan. If you're going to follow Christ, follow Christ. And there is, that doesn't mean be stupid, but I'm trying not to get too much into the nuance of this, but it's, what he said reflected a lot of what I've lived and what I've wished a lot of our leaders to say, because they're not saying them. And when people say, oh, he needs to stay in his lane, he's talking about vocations. He's talking about being a father, being a mother. And that is totally within his lane, because that's what he chose. And that's what specifically he discerned, right? So like, you can't say he's not staying in his lane. He's a football player, right? That's his job, but that's not his vocation. And I know we use the term in a way that conflates the two in the business world. It's really annoying it's really annoying when they use that term. It's like, that's not what that term means. You're not discerning to be a project manager. Like that's not a vocation. But all right, that's whatever. So again, like it's amazing to me. Also you have America Magazine, and you have U.S. Catholic Magazine, and then you had I believe the Reporter said something, and it's just like, why are you, like, it really reveals their angle. Like I said, like it in a very similar way to how COVID happens, right? Like if your priest was like, all right, we're closing up shop, like right away, we're just going to do it. The bishop didn't tell me I had to do it, but like we're closing up shop. I'm not gonna go off and do things. You probably shouldn't go to that parish anymore. Like you shouldn't be under the spiritual father of that person, because the spiritual well-being of that, or I'm sorry, the focus of that spiritual father with you doesn't seem to be that important. And that was a huge part of what he said. And again, I just loved it when he was pointing out, because at the time of COVID, I made a video about that there are things that we get, there are avenues and times in which God seems to make it abundantly clear who is trying to do what they're supposed to do in terms of their vocation, whether it's personal or global. In this case, it was global, right? Like there's a time where all the bishops closed up shop and they basically gave this impression that the sacraments weren't that important. And you know, in his speech, he said, "Let us never forget." And yeah, we should never forget. It's like I would attribute that very similar to the Arian heresy, not in the sense of they committed a heresy. Okay, I am not a theologian. I'm not going to say that, but in terms of like the importance of it, like there was a time in our history, in recent memory, a few years ago, in which the sacraments weren't distributed, and the priests were too afraid to go to those that were dying. Like we did not have courageous men, by and large. And it reflects what I've talked about in other videos, where we have a lukewarm laity. And we know that because the very few of them go to mass. And I've showed the statistics on this. And you know, I think it's like 20 to 23% right now of the 66 million go to mass. And so that's about 15 million. So about 15 million of the 66 go to mass. Most of them are lukewarm. And, you know, in a lot of cases, that goes up a level. Like that lukewarmness, there's an osmosis of that in the community, where from a sociology standpoint, it goes up to the priests, and it affects the priests and the bishops, because they're growing up in that environment. And if they're growing up in a lukewarm faith, you know, they heard the calling and they followed the discernment. That doesn't mean that there aren't in how they raised, that there isn't conditioning that was a problem that they have to deal with. And so, you know, I'm not going to just be like, oh, the priests and the bishops suck. I don't. We need to pray for our priests and bishops. We need to pray for those that are going through seminary and those who are discerning the priesthood. We need to pray for everybody. But like he said, we really should not forget the time in which the sacraments were barred from us. So I'm going to go back into what I originally was going to talk about, and not you know, that's a tangent. So the city of Kansas, or Kansas City, I'm sorry. Basically, you can see it on the screen. Let people know where Harrison lived, and then they apologized for it. The Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, is now making sure that no Missourians are going to be targeted for their religious beliefs. And so this is a really positive sign, right? Like, we have a culture that is very much against Catholicism and what we preach, what we teach, and how we're even raising our kids. And we have, like, this doesn't happen often, but we have an Attorney General who's willing to defend what's going on right now, defend Harrison with this. And that's, I think, great, because I think doxing like that, I'm probably going to go back and edit this to make sure that part's like no longer there, because I don't want to be a means for people to find that out. So I'll probably go back and snippet that out of the video in YouTube editor. But that's tantamount to a death threat to me. That because one of the reasons why I don't give my full name is because if I gave my full name, I wouldn't be able to do this. Um, or there are other projects that I do. If I gave my full name, I would lose my livelihood. In a very similar way, when you have passions that deal with millions of people, statistically speaking, some of them are crazy. Like so, and unfortunately, we have a group of people who know that and will post things they shouldn't be posting, and something happens, and all of a sudden something really bad happens, and they're like, oh well, we didn't say anything. But again, like, doxing is not okay. It doesn't matter how famous you are. Doxing is never okay. All right, so let's see. So, and then there's the DEI officer for Kansas City. Like, the NFL is steadfast in our commitment to inclusion, which only makes our league stronger. The league's chief DEI officer, Jonathan Bean. So, all right. So there's that word again, stronger, when it comes to diversity and inclusion and all this other stuff. Studies show that that's not actually the case. In fact, like, living in the private sector, there is a lot of evidence coming out that the DEI training actually makes things worse. And so why do we do it? Well, because it checks a box, right? For some reason, there's, I'm not going to go, I guess I'm not going to go big of a tangent as the other thing, but it's just this idea of, well, we have to push inclusion even if the scientific evidence doesn't support what we're saying. And so the message matters over reality. And that seems to be their theme, right? Like, the message matters more than reality. And so, all right. So let's see. Did I cover everything? I just want to make sure I covered everything. All right. Yeah. So I covered everything. Again, like, I have daughters. And so this idea of motherhood being attacked like this, because that's what it is. Motherhood is being attacked. It's terrible. It's not right. It's wrong. And whenever someone gets attacked like this, the whole idea is to shut them up. The whole idea is to say, hey, we don't want the powers that be do not want you to promote women to be in a position in which gives them the most happiness from a statistical standpoint. Like, study after study points to that. The problem, obviously, is because that leads to a more prosperous family unit. And what happens when that happens? It leads to a more traditional family structure, which leads to more conservative values. And so there's an impetus to fight this from a political standpoint, not just simply because, the feminism issue, but because it actually impacts votes. Statistically speaking, like, what's really holding up, like, leftist policies is single women. Well, what happens when single women are like, hey, no, like, maybe I should try to get married and really focus on being a family first as opposed to career first. Like, that perspective change is huge, because it points to the ability to it points to a real legacy. Like, it doesn't point to, all right, well, I'm going to work, and maybe I'll get a plaque, I'll get a promotion, maybe I'll even be the CEO of a company, but you're going to be forgotten later. Like, and literally anybody can do that job, like, in terms of, like, potential. Like, if you're not there, well, someone else who also interviewed for that job could have done it and could have led the company in a very similar way, not exactly the same way, but in a very similar way. Like, when it comes to, like, CEOs and stuff, like, when it comes to CEOs, there's very little revolution that happens. Like, where there's like, oh, this revolutionary idea comes through. It's like, no, like, a lot of those ideas are just well known. And it's about getting them out in the populace not necessarily within the company. But that's a different issue. So like this idea of like the career woman being promoted like it is, well, like that can lead to problems, right? And we see that. There are very few women I know that are my age that are married. And that's really sad. And I'm not saying that like looking down on them. It's I want them to be happy. They're my friends. But they're other people's friends. They're my wife's friends. And there's this focus on getting into a career and wanting to have that career before having your kids. And then I'm 36, so like they're in their 30s, and you're going to have problems from a fertility standpoint, because after 30, like fertility drops significantly. It doesn't go to zero, obviously. I wouldn't say that. That's not what the stats say. But the fertility, like there is a level drop, and it does become harder. And so, and that makes sense, right? Because you've gone 15, 16 years since puberty and you haven't had a kid. And so your body is not conditioned for a kid. So not to get into the biology necessarily, my master's was focused on biostats. And so like I know a lot in that area, especially when it comes to fecundity. And so, or at least, I studied it. So I don't want to pretend like I'm sort of a doctor. I'm not a doctor. But it does become a problem, and studies reflect that, like satisfaction studies, which I've also worked for a survey company, that a very popular one. And so I've seen that too. So I don't really have anything else to say, I guess, because I don't want to just ramble with a bunch of platitudes and conclusions that are kind of like tangential. And chat is not very lively, which makes sense because it is Friday. But I do appreciate you taking the time on your Friday to listen to what I'm saying. And anybody who comes after, I appreciate you listening to what I'm saying. If you could give me feedback on that intro, though, that would be super awesome. And you know what? I made this banner. To please pray for my wife. She makes her first Holy Communion and confirmation on Sunday. And I totally didn't play it the whole time. And now I'm remembering to put it down. So yes, my formerly pagan wife will be making her confirmation and first communion this Sunday on Pentecost. And I would please ask that you pray for her, and for all the graces that the Holy Spirit will give her. And I'm pretty sure she's okay with saying, okay. So I'm pretty sure she's okay with having an interview about her conversion and how she went from point A, paganism, to confirmation this Sunday. I know when I was talking to Avoiding Babylon, they kind of asked those questions a little bit, and it seems like we have an answer because we talked about it just before I came on, but we didn't have enough time to actually like parse it out. So that will happen, apparently. So I'm being legalistic here, but it's very much something that I'm looking forward to, because I haven't quite asked her myself all the details. And so just listening to her talk about it, I think would be like, it's kind of going to be my first response. And so I have no idea how I'm going to react, but that's I think that would be good to keep it that way. It doesn't look like I'm acting. It's like that's whatever. Anyways, that's going way off the thing. Anyways, please pray for Harrison. Like, he's got a lot of crap going at him. And he's got a lot of crap. He's got a bullseye in his back because he's a practicing Catholic and he's talking about Catholic truth. And so that is bring pop. Okay. All right. So she says bring popcorn and tissues. So that's Oh, get the get the popcorn board. Thank you, Fratter. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I do also, so I know like I said I was gonna stop and I'm still going. Like now you kind of feel how my wife feels when I leave mass. I just keep going and keep going, keep going. Um so we have a consecrated virgin at our parish. She was one of two that got consecrated. I think it was like 3 years ago by the archbishop. So she said she would be willing to have an interview with me. And it's really important that we have that interview for a variety of reasons. One, we're going to talk about her story, about her vocation, and how she came to be a consecrated virgin, which does include moving through a religious order because she was a religious sister before that. And then, so that's a very interesting aspect that I would like to hear more about because she told me about that. And then we're also going to talk about why in 1965 there was about 180,000 religious sisters to where there's about 30,000 now, which is a bigger drop than the priests, which went from about like 58,000 to 33,000. So why did all the religious sisters leave? Well, I honestly think the answer will surprise you because it's pretty convoluted and it's not what you would expect. Like I think it was the Benedictine order from the college at the college that Harrison did a speech. You saw this photo of these religious sisters, and they were all of a much older age. And if you noticed, you probably wouldn't notice that they were religious sisters simply by looking at them, because none of them wore habits. And so I think that that's like a huge problem from a religious standpoint, like in terms of like religious orders. Like it seems very odd that there wouldn't be some um, uh, clothing differential from the normal, like the normal lady. I mean, they're technically lady, but like, those that haven't done vows. And so, okay. So sorry, I'm just a little, seeing chat for a second. All right. I think I'm good. I think I'm going to, stop. But again, if you could leave some feedback, either on X or on, the YouTube channel, I would love to know if the intro was good, if it like set the mood, or if it was too much, or even if it was cringe. Let me know. But yeah, thank you for joining me this Friday, and I hope you enjoy the end of your Easter and the beginning of your Pentecost.